What's up, everybody? Welcome to episode 326 of Stand Up with Pete Dominic Daily. Joining me today, professor, writer, author, and executive producer of the Netflix documentary series based on his book, The Family. Jeff Sharlet joins me, and comedian and lawyer, the always hilarious, brilliant, thoughtful J.L. Cauvin. I'm Pete Dominic. It's time to stand up with me right now. Stand up. And we are off. Welcome to the show. I'm very excited that you have chosen to listen to Stand Up today and any day. Please tell your friends, spread the word. I know there's a lot of different podcasts out there, but how many daily podcasts out there? How many daily podcasts do what I'm doing? Tell your friends. You can have a great news recap, and generally, I have two excellent guests who are experts and super thoughtful, well-spoken people joining me in conversation on every episode, Monday through Friday. It's independent journalism, and while it's free, it isn't cheap, so please sign up to support me with a paid subscription. Thank you. 5 stars, write a review, and become a member of our community. It is Thursday, so we meet tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern on Zoom. If you're a stand-up member, subscriber, you'll get a link to that virtual hangout. You can also join us anytime on the Discord platform. Looking forward to seeing my friends this evening. Had a great conversation last week. I don't know if we can top that one, but really looking forward to seeing you tonight. Okay, first of all, I do want to mention what I said at the end of yesterday's show. I want to open with today's show that sadly, we lost Midwin Charles. Midwin was on this show several times, I think 4 times in all. She was on my SiriusXM radio show several times as well. You recognize her from MSNBC and CNN. She was a lawyer's lawyer. She was a strong black woman, Haitian American woman, and I'll play some tributes that were made to her and read a little bit from my friend Dr. Jason Johnson at the end of the news before we get to my first guest, Jeff Sharlet. But also, show notes, there's links to previous conversations I've had with Midwin, and I think tomorrow's show, I'm probably going to bring some of those back along with Christian Finnegan. We'll see if I can get to that, but really appreciate all of your thoughts, those of you that reached out to me in many ways. Thank you very much. Midwin and I weren't really close. It was more like we were colleagues, and I was just always happy when she was able to join me. I always learned so much from her, yet it's just major loss for just an irreplaceable person. I don't know what else to say. I'll talk more about, play those tributes at the end here, but I want to get to the last 24 hours in news. First of all, President Biden came out and talked a little bit more about infrastructure. I think that's important, and that's why I wanted to play these clips for you. I think just some sound bites of Biden talking infrastructure, keeping the heat on this American Jobs Act deal.
Last week in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, I announced my plan to rebuild what I refer to as the backbone of America through the American Jobs Plan. It's not a plan that tinkers around the edges. It's a once-in-a-generation investment in America. Unlike anything we've done since we built the interstate highway system and won the space race decades ago. It's the single largest investment in American jobs since World War II. And it's a plan that puts millions of Americans to work to fix what's broken in our country. Tens of thousands of miles of roads and highways, thousands of bridges, in desperate need of repair. But it also is a blueprint for infrastructure needed for tomorrow, not just yesterday, tomorrow.
A lot of questions as to how it's going to be paid for. Joe Biden proposing to raise money on wealthy individuals and corporations. No one making under $400,000 is going to have their taxes raised for this, but he was asked at least this one question by a reporter when he came out to tout the American Jobs Act yesterday.
Are you willing to go lower than the 28% corporate tax rate?
I'm willing to listen to that. I'm wide open to, but we got to pay for this. We got to pay. There's many other ways we can do it, but I'm willing to negotiate that. I've come forward with the best, most rational way, in my view, the fairest way to pay for it. But there are many other ways as well, and I'm open.
Will you have failed on your promise of bipartisanship if you don't get Republicans on board with this plan, your first plan passed along party lines?
Look, what I said was I would try to work with my friends on the other side. There are things we're working on together, some of which we passed and some we will pass. But the last plan, I laid out what was available, what I was suggesting, and how I deal with it. And a bipartisan group came to see me. And then the Republican group came to see me. And they started off at $600 billion, and that was it. If they'd come forward with a plan that did the bulk of it, it was $1.3 billion or $4 billion, 2 or 3, that allowed me to have pieces of all that was in there, I would have been prepared to compromise. But they didn't. They didn't move an inch. Not an inch. But for example, I am dealing with a bipartisan group that came to see me. Now it's about, 3-4 weeks ago when they came about computer chips and they said, look, we have to have our own supply. We have to work together. We're working on that. Chuck Schumer and I think McConnell are about to introduce a bill along those lines. So I'm prepared to work. I really am. But to automatically say that the only thing that's infrastructure is a highway, a bridge, or whatever, that's just not rational. It really isn't. I think the vast majority of Americans think everything from the sewer pipes to the sewer facilities to the water pipes, I think they're infrastructure.
All right. He couldn't remember a few things off the top of his head there, like broadband and other kinds of infrastructure. I mean, that should come pretty quick to him at this point, but he'll get it. He'll get it. Anyway, Chris Hayes had Congresswoman Katie Porter on, and she is a congresswoman from a swingish district, if you will, in California. And he asked her, what are the politics in your district like for the idea of raising taxes on individuals making over $400 million in corporations? This is what she had to say. Congresswoman Katie Porter.
Well, let's be clear. What we're trying to do is make the investments that our country needs to grow our economy. And that is in the interest of corporations to have a strong economy. They need roads. They need bridges. They need an educated, trained workforce. They need a workforce that's drinking clean water, for example, that has broadband. And that's exactly what they're being asked to pay for here. The president's proposal, which I strongly support, is to simply revert the corporate income tax rate to what it was before Donald Trump's disastrous presidency. This is a simple proposal. It's to simply go back to that 28% rate, which, by the way, would still be the lowest rate of taxation on corporations since before World War II.
All right, let's go from infrastructure and the American Jobs Act in the last 24 hours to another very important conversation, which are all the new laws being passed, restrictions on voting. This horrible controversy, as it's being called, the new Jim Crow. And also on MSNBC last night, Derek Johnson, who's the CEO of the NAACP, was on, and I thought this was really great. He nails it here.
This is a solution searching for a problem. I live in Mississippi. The reason why you have a higher Black turnout is because there's aggressive organizing to overcome the barriers. The reason why you have a higher Black turnout in Georgia is because of the groups like Stacey and NSA have organized to overcome the barriers. There are no issues here to be solved. If Section 5 of the voting rights was in place, none of this could even be possible. If we want to do anything, we need to make sure we open up access to elections. And it is unfathomable to think that they're constantly trying to compare Georgia with other states, when in fact, we're talking about Georgia, a state with a long history of suppressing votes. And the worst thing that happened in their mind is the outcome of the November election, the outcome of the runoff election was different than anybody expected because people overcame the barriers that were in front of them.
All right, a little bit more from Derek Johnson, this time a little historical perspective.
I mean, this is not about intent. This is about impact. This is about the outcome. And we fought for for so many years to ensure that voting was made accessible to all citizens, but particularly African Americans. And what we're witnessing in Georgia, and what I just heard from the governor in South Carolina, is old school dog whistle politics of states' rights, coupled with a modern day trend to try to shape the voter, the electorate, to meet the need of the elected officials, as opposed to the elected officials trying to win over voters. The Republican Party, conservative, they need to understand that the policies that they have in place are failed policies. They have yet to enlarge the tent to attract more people. So as opposed to do what's logical when you have a political system that's evolving so you can attract more voters, they're trying to downsize the system so you can limit access. That's not consistent with our constitutions, and that's not where we should be in this nation.
And here now on voting, the same issue is fire from Elie Mystal, who joined Joy Reid on the Readout on MSNBC last night.
Explain to these folks, please, for us, what's so racist about the Georgia law?
Yeah, I mean, there's math on this, right? Like, and I know that Lindsey Graham, that sick man, doesn't believe in math. But there's math on this, and we know that when we do things like voter IDs, when we close down early voting, when we stop mail-in voting, we know that it disproportionately affects Black and brown people. That's just science, Lindsey. Look, all this is the, when you look at something like the National Review article today from Kevin Williamson, last seen advocating for women to be hanged if they seek an abortion, they didn't do anything new. The Republicans are not doing anything new. They are Columbusing the idea that any white man with two ducats to scratch together has had since the founding of this country, and that is a hemisphere of their own. All they want is a hemisphere where white people are the only ones that matter. We have tried in the Constitution 4 times to stop.
I don't know what happened there on that clip, but you get the gist. And Elie Mystal on fire right there. Got to get him back on this podcast and get him going. Always love hearing from, reading him. All right, and finally on this issue, I want to go to the Secretary of State of Georgia, Brad Raffensberger, who gets it pretty much right here, in my opinion, until the very end when he starts talking about voter ID, and where I think he's wrong. Nonetheless, wanted to give you a little bit more perspective. Here he is.
Well, in Georgia, we had a fair and honest election. It didn't turn out the way my party wanted it to turn out. I was disappointed also. But at the end of the day, President Trump came up short. But that 2 months or 3 months of disinformation, misinformation, really took a shot to the confidence in elections. And therefore, whatever we can do to restore confidence is very important. I think one of those aspects is making sure that we have strong, objective measures of voter identification for absentee ballots. So I support the measure to use driver's license number and your birthday, day, month, year. It becomes very objective instead of subjective like signature match.
All right. Well, still, you're trying to solve a problem that doesn't exist. And as you said, those 2 to 3 months of mis and disinformation really took a toll on voter confidence. Well, this doesn't mean you have to pass new laws making it harder to vote because you lost. It just doesn't add up there. I don't think that was a good argument, but I still wanted to share it with you. All right, let me now turn to COVID-19, coronavirus, the pandemic, and its waning weeks here in the United States of America, although it's raging in Brazil and other countries, and these new variants are actually spiking the COVID rates, especially even now with young people in different parts of the country. Here's Anthony Fauci, who I'm glad Fox Business or Fox News' Neil Cavuto had him on that network to, not that he's got a lot of confidence in the viewers there, but still good that he was on. Cavuto asked him the question about when do we get back to normal?
I don't think it's going to be a precise number. I don't know what that number is. I can't say it's going to be this percent, but we'll know it when we see it. It'll be obvious as the numbers come down rather dramatically. And when they do, we're going to wind up getting really stepwise much, much more towards what we consider approaching a degree of normality, which everyone really quite dramatically notices it. It's on the way. Hang in there.
Whew, we are trying to hang in there, but it is obviously really confusing and fraught, and some of us are mostly fully vaccinated. Some of us are partially vaccinated. What does this all mean? Well, Lori Garrett, who is a widely respected expert, was on MSNBC with Nicole Wallace in the last 24 hours yesterday, and so I wanted to share with you her. I think this is a few minutes, but it's all worth it. I was glad I listened to it. So, of course, I wanted to share it with you on today's show.
We're in a time of real confusion. And it's justifiable that the average American is feeling like they're getting mixed messages. Things are kind of goofy. They can't figure out, should they be very scared or not scared at all or somewhere in between? You know, just 3 weeks ago when we were sort of demarcating this arbitrary alleged one-year anniversary of the epidemic, the news was full of past tense stories. It was as if the whole pandemic was suddenly in our rearview mirror, and we could all lollygag off into the sunset with smiles on our faces. And then, of course, we've had spectacular success rolling out the vaccines. You know, on Saturday, 4 million Americans got vaccinated in one day. That's amazing, and that was on a holiday weekend. So there's lots to be excited about, but there is also a great deal that is nerve-wracking, fingernail-biting. The reason that CDC Director Rochelle Walensky said she saw gloom and doom on the horizon. And that is because, first of all, we have surging variant strains, not one, not two, not three, not six, a whole array of different variants from all over the world and some homegrown ones, such as we have here in New York City. The India variant that seems to be behind this huge surge of COVID in both India and Bangladesh is a double mutation, and it has shown up now in San Francisco. The terrible variant that is sweeping across Brazil, and is at least partially why Brazil now has the #1 horrible status of the biggest death tolls in the world right now. Brazil's variant has shown up in Boston and in the Massachusetts area. And boy, Michigan is fighting out of control spread. And this is really being driven by the UK variant, the so-called B117, which is a rapid transmitter. So we have this mixed picture where justifiably people are confused. Are we supposed to read this as a time of danger, as a time of joy? And illustrating that, Nicole, this weekend, the holiday weekend, saw two big changes. One, we went back to 2019 levels of airplane traffic across the nation, and this movie, Godzilla versus Kong, took in almost $49 million in 2 days, and that was people in the seats in movie theaters.
Well, I just thought that was a great hit on MSNBC. That's what they call it, a hit when you call into a show or you're on panel on a show. How did you do? Did you do a hit? Yeah, I did a couple of hits today. Anyway, so that was Lori Garrett. I thought that was great context explaining kind of where we're at. She's very sober and honest and has a lot of credibility. I have a lot of trust in what she generally says. All right, that's what I've got for you on COVID. St. Louis elected their first black female mayor after running on a progressive platform and a promise to reform and revitalize the city. Her name is Tishara Jones, and she joined Joy Reid last night on MSNBC's Readout. This is what she sounds like.
That's within these numbers is St. Louis is one of the most hyper-segregated cities in the country. We are known for the Del Mar divide, and people that live north of Del Mar, 90% of the people that live north of Del Mar are African-American. And the first 12 coronavirus deaths were all black people. So, you know, we have totally neglected over half of our city, and we cannot expect it to thrive if half of it is left to fend for itself.
Good luck out in St. Louis, tough city to lead for anybody. And also, I realize it's really hard to cover the trial of Derek Chauvin on the podcast and decide and find the right clips and create context. I mean, there's some really good shows, I think, and news media outlets covering it well, but I always want to try to throw at least one or two clips in. And instead of grabbing something from the trial, I did see this from Paul Butler, who is a former federal prosecutor and author of a really interesting good book, Chokehold. He was on MSNBC analyzing some of the moments of the trial, and I don't know if I need to set this up much more. Hopefully this makes sense. Paul Butler.
So first, the problem with the defense argument about the crowd is that last week the jury met the people in the crowd. the brave teenage girl who made the video, the EMT first responder who begged Chauvin to let her take Mr. Floyd's pulse, Charles McMillan, the older gentleman who broke down in sobs because he couldn't save Mr. Floyd's life. The crowd doesn't look like a vicious, angry mob. The jury might think the people in the crowd dealt with Mr. Floyd more responsibly than Chauvin did. And unfortunately, the prosecutor has to respond to the argument that Mr. Floyd died of a drug overdose, and this is just the beginning of a long, dirty pathway. So next week, the defense has its own videotape from an arrest of Mr. Floyd in 2019. It starts out like his encounter with Chauvin. Cops approach the car. They take out their gun, and Mr. Floyd then appears to swallow some pills. And that time, the cops took him to the hospital. So the defense wants the jury to think that Mr. Floyd did the same thing when Chauvin arrested him, but this time, when he swallowed the pills, they killed him.
Oh, man, did he end that on a fine point. Paul Butler on MSNBC. All right, in other news, just wanted to mention a couple of other headlines. Former Vice President Mike Pence has signed a multi-million-dollar two-book deal with Simon & Schuster, making him one of the first alums of former President Donald Trump's inner circle to ink such a lucrative contract. I wonder who's going to write those books for him, because he is a real dumb dummy. In other news, Georgia State Representative Congresswoman Park Cannon, who was arrested last month while protesting the state's controversial election law. Remember, she was knocking on the door while Brian Kemp, the governor, was signing these voter restriction laws while under an oil painting of a slave plantation. And then the police arrested her, and there were concerns she might actually go to jail even for a long time. Well, she's not going to be charged. That is huge and welcome news. This didn't get enough coverage, but you'll probably hear more about it today. President Joe Biden plans to announce new executive actions today. A person familiar with the plans told CNN, fulfilling a commitment he made in the aftermath of two deadly shootings last month. Did I say executive actions on guns? Yeah. So that's really important. I'm not sure exactly what he's going to be able to do, and why couldn't Obama do that? By the way, a majority of Americans in a recent poll apparently want The Rock, Dwayne The Rock Johnson, to run for president and Matthew McConaughey to run for governor of Texas. So that's where America's at. I mean, you know, recognizable names, people that seem like they might be able to be good in leadership roles because they're good at acting like it by reading other people's writing as actor. Yeah, you know, we did elect Ronald Reagan after all, and Donald Trump. Okay, so I do want to just mention again here, Midwin Charles, and how much of a loss she is for a lot of reasons. And I wanted to read for you first Jason Johnson, my friend Jason Johnson, who's actually the one who called me and told me that she'd passed before it became public on Twitter when her family tweeted it out from Midwin's account. He wrote an obituary for Midwin Charles at the Griot I shared on Twitter, and you can read that all there. But just in part, he wrote, I'm still processing my grief about Midwin Charles transitioning, but what I want the entire world to know is this. She was a wonderful person, a loving daughter, sister, colleague, and friend. You don't meet many people like her in this lifetime, and you want to make sure you show all the love, support, and appreciation you can for the people like that when they are here. I'll be forever blessed with the memory of our talks about life, love, family, and politics. Her encouraging texts and all the times I got to work with her, as will everyone else who got even a glimpse of what an amazing and meaningful woman she was. The world is a sadder place without Midwin Charles, and she will be sorely missed. Midwin Charles may have spoken like she was in front of the Supreme Court and looked like she just stepped off a Miami runway, but there was never anything pretentious or fake about her. In a majority white legal and media spaces, Midwin moved with the grace and ease of a seasoned pro. And now here is Joy Reid and Elie Mystal remembering Midwin Charles on MSNBC yesterday.
Very quickly before we go, Elie, I know that you and I have both we've been talking offline about this, but Midwin Charles, we lost her shockingly. I think everyone is pretty shocked out there about her very untimely death. This was a young, vibrant, gorgeous, brilliant woman. But I wanted to give you an opportunity to talk about her as well, because I know she meant a lot to you as a fellow lawyer, as a fellow TV lawyer and somebody who advocates for all the good things, all the justice, I want to let you have an opportunity to talk a bit about her as well.
I just wanted to say really quickly how much of a warrior that we've really lost this week. Midwin, many people know her from her trenchant analysis on TV. I think the first time I met her was on your show. We were like only the three people who knew that Bill Barr was as bad as he seemed to be. But she was that person because she came from such a in the trenches kind of legal background. This was an amazingly credentialed woman. She's a clerk for the Sixth Circuit. She worked for Fried Fank, one of the top 50 law firms in the country, and then stopped that work and left a lot of money on the table to go and help people. And so it's such a hard thing to lose. Midwin was one of those people that, she's one of those lawyers that you call when you only had one phone call, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And the Haitian American community and the Haitian American Law Association, I know, is also really grieving right now. All my Haitian American friends have been calling and texting, and it's really tragic. So we love you, and she is now our ancestor, and we love her, and we will hopefully her spirit will continue to stay with us.
And finally, Stephanie Rule on MSNBC also remembered Midwin and played this great clip of her on her show as well that I wanted to share.
Before we go to break, I have to share some heartbreaking news. This morning, we are mourning the loss of a fierce force of a woman who you saw many, many times on this show throughout the years. Our dear friend, Midwin Charles. She's passed away. Her family says they will miss her for a lifetime. Well, so will we. And as we honor her and her extraordinary life that was cut too short, I want to let her share her own words and tell you why she was unapologetically proud of the woman she was.
Both my parents are from Haiti. I am first-generation American, and when my parents came here, they did so, like most immigrants, looking for a better life. And they've done an extraordinary job in raising two daughters who contribute to American society. And I think that's what's being lost here, is this idea that immigrants come to this country and they do not contribute. I will tell you this about Haitian people. You are not going to meet a group of people who are more resilient, who are more educated, who have more dignity, who are more hardworking, who have more respect, and who want to do nothing more than to contribute to this country and to this world.
Midwin, so rough. And I'll try to play some of our old interviews, too. You can also go back and listen to those conversations if you want to. Midwin was on episode 272, 225, 164, and I think her first appearance on the podcast was episode 95. And I'll play some of those clips. I'll try to go back and listen to them, play some of them for you. Tomorrow, if I have time, it's going to be a crazy day, but we'll get to it at some point. All right, now it is time to move on to the final section of news, the part that everything else is left over. It's not politics or COVID. It might not be the most important story, but still, it's consequential. It matters, or at least it's interesting. Time to have a little bit of fun, maybe, with the news dump. And now let's listen together to another recent jingle submitted by the very talented listener and subscriber, Pete Coe.
Ravens in the parking lot pecking at some clumps. It's myriad types of roadkill on today's news dump.
He put the word myriad in there. The Raven Roadkill edition of the news dump jingle. Pete, thank you very much. Hope to see you tonight at the Hangout. Tonight, 8 p.m. East, everybody. Sign up to join us at patreon.com/Pete Dominic. Let's start on Mars, shall we? Because just days after NASA's Perseverance rover gently dropped the Ingenuity helicopter on the surface of Mars, the robot companions took a selfie together on Tuesday and beamed it back to Earth. Very cool picture. You got to check it out. The Texan woman who had grown the world's longest fingernails has finally gotten them cut. Her final measurement was 24 feet, 0.7 inches. That's how long her fingernails are. I highly recommend that you don't look up the photo of this woman because it's super, super gross, as you can imagine. Star quarterback of the Houston Texans is in deep trouble. Sponsors are dropping him left and right. Beats headphones. Nike has suspended sponsorship. of Desean Watson, who has now been accused of sexual assault and harassment by several women. 22 women, as a matter of fact, have said that they were assaulted, and Ashley Solis came out publicly and no longer anonymously and said she was assaulted and traumatized when she tried to give him a massage. This is a brutal story, a really sad and tragic story. I listened to a coverage of it today, and apparently the guy, he had a real weird move. He would reach out to Instagram, hot women he saw on Instagram, and ask them to give him a massage. Some of them were actually massage therapists, apparently, and then he'd take his dick out, and that was one of his moves, and I'm not sure what else he did, but just gross and awful. Let's see, what else do I have for you? Oh, Carnival Cruise Line said it lost $2 billion, but bookings are up. Who's taking a cruise? Do a stand-up cruise. Who's in for that? Also, $2 billion is the number that Target is going to spend at black-owned businesses. I want to learn more about that story. That's interesting. I mentioned Target, so I'm contractually obligated to mention Walmart, where feds are saying that a Walmart worker stole $124,000 in gift cards. How the hell did he get away with that? And why am I insinuating that it's a man? Best Buy launched a new $200 membership program to fight Amazon. And when he heard about it, Amazon trillionaire Jeff Bezos apparently is quoted as saying, whatever. A Buddhist monk was rescued from a flooded cave after being trapped for days. Yeah, he was in this cave for 4 days, and guess where it was? Thailand. He had apparently gone in there to meditate. Listen, stop going into caves in Thailand, okay? I mean, nothing good seems to be happening in the caves of Thailand. Apparently, Tom Hanks has already signed a deal to make the movie about the man's life. And a Superman comic book sold for $3.25 million. Action Comics #1, the most expensive comic ever sold. You know, I have the original issue of ElfQuest as well as the Nom. Yeah, I wonder what those are worth. And by the way, I was watching the new Superman show. It's called Superman and Lois. And I don't know why I'm watching it, because it's super dumb. You know what else is super dumb? Superman. Yeah, and his dumb secret identity, which is eyeglasses. I love superheroes. I love comic books. I even love Superman. But that is that really bothers me. I just can't suspend disbelief that nobody knows who he is. He's just a mild-mannered reporter until he takes off his glasses and he's Superman. How did you... Really? They're not even... All right, that is your news dump for today, and now it's time to get to my first guest, who is a very impressive guy. No, not J.L. Cauvin. He is coming up, and you don't want to miss that. Funny, interesting, and brilliant as always. No, Jeff Sharlet is a professor at Dartmouth now, where he's an English professor and director of creative writing. But he's also a highly respected journalist and best-selling author of 7 books, including The Family, which is the basis for the 2019 Netflix documentary series, where he was the executive producer. Me asking about him about his tweet saying that the governor of Florida, Rick DeSantis, seemed to always be wearing oversized suits. Here we go. Jeff Sharlet.
Real question. I thought, maybe there's something I don't know, or someone's going to embarrass me. They're going to say, that is so insensitive to you. You don't know that he has he has a large second.
You're too thoughtful.
Something that he has to cover or something. But the suits are weird, right? There's
yes.
It's not just my imagination. Yeah, that puzzles me. Rick DeSantis puzzles me. Rick DeSantis as a contender. There's something about his face. And look, I say this as a person, I have this face, so it's not like I'm speaking, I'm not punching down. But how is this guy, he came out at CPAC, he came out as behind Trump as the second top contender for 24. Now, partly that was in Florida, but the depth of support for him sticks. And I think it has to do, he's unpleasant. He's easily flustered. He is, and again, I'm not throwing stones. I'm short myself, but he's short, which in national politics doesn't help you. he's just got a sour pickle look to his face. How is this guy doing this? And I think it's because he killed so many people. I really do. I think this is like, we are in such a deep perversion that who are the contenders? Kristi Noem and DeSantis, the governors who most devotedly pursued the death of their citizens, and that there's something that somehow become a perverse measure of virtue.
Well, because they led. They were defiant. That's why people like them. They don't like them because they killed people. They like them because they didn't give a shit, and they said, you do whatever you need to do. Take care of yourself. You don't need to wear a mask or any of this nonsense. And yeah, thousands and thousands of people died as a result of their horror show, which they knew better for. But isn't that it?
It's got to be deeper than they told you what you wanted to hear, right? But actually, I think you're onto something there when you said they led. You didn't. I think there's a lot of people who weren't sure what they wanted to hear. I think there was lots of people who, in other circumstances, we all think this, would have risen to the occasion. And I don't go in for that kind of thing that you see on Twitter, like, all Republicans, it's just a death cult and so on, and they all just hate everybody. Most everyday Republicans didn't want people to die. They didn't want people in their own family to die. They didn't want to end up in the hospital themselves and so on. But they weren't sure how to respond. And so, right, Rick DeSantis led. He said, you're not sure how to respond? I'll tell you. Go to the beach. Oh, okay. Well, I wasn't sure what to do because nothing like this ever happened. But if you say so, that must be leadership. And it is leadership. It's just like leadership is this word that often gets this sort of like positive connotation, and it shouldn't have a positive connotation. It's at best neutral. At best neutral.
It's a really good point. I'm going to steal that, as I've stolen so many of your points. But there's a question as to what Donald Trump's influence, the future, how influential he is. I say that his influence has waned dramatically, mostly because he's not on Twitter and because the insurrection horrified a lot of people. But more importantly, I feel like the question should be who's trying to be like him. And I think that's what you were kind of getting at too with Rick DeSantis and others who would replace him. And the other people that you could talk about, I think, are media types if they decided to run for office, like your Tucker Carlsons or your, Ben Shapiro's. But what do you think? Has his influence waned now that he's out of office, off Twitter and with the insurrection? And are there other people just trying to be like him as much as they can? Or do I have that analysis wrong, backwards?
I'm really, because this is sort of, this is one of the beats that I'm writing on now. I just signed up to do a kind of an ongoing column for Vanity Fair. And following this stuff. And I'm also sort of trying to report out some stories around the insurrection. So I go back and forth. I think his influence is waning. It might be correct, but it's not the whole story in the sense that it's suspended right now. It's not waning like that's it, your day is over. I think it could be reactivated in a moment. And the other sort of ways in which his influence is there is that obviously he shaped the Republican Party. It's like the two most influential politicians of the 21st century in the United States. People are going to get upset. How can you not say Obama? Because Obama did not actually structurally change things so much. It's Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders. And Bernie Sanders and the Sanders people get mad at me for better and worse.
Really?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think you have to ask yourself seriously at this point, and I think more and more historians will as we get further away from it. Was Trump possible without Sanders? I'm not saying to the Sanders people, I live in Vermont, I vote for Sanders. I'm not saying to the Sanders people that they're alike. They're not. But what Sanders was the one who sort of was really able to sort of crack the establishment world of Washington. And just to get a lot of people say, fuck it. Actually, I don't need to have a reasonable candidate, such that we're now at a moment where a candidate like Mitt Romney is unthinkable. Or here in Vermont, my governor, Phil Scott, is a Republican. He's a Republican who really has led on COVID, has kept Vermont safer than other states. He is a conservative Republican who has decided to take steps on gun control after a number of incidents there. And he does the research and backs it up. I would never vote for this guy. He's a conservative Republican, but he is this reminder of, oh, that's right. this sort of time warp. There was a time when that's what a Republican was. I don't want to say they're better. There's now, look, Reagan was a monster in my book, but Phil Scott 10 years ago, Phil Scott would be having the whole party at his door to put him forward as a national candidate. Now.
Well, yeah, let's talk about what changed. Love that you push back on anything I might frame wrong. That it evolved from the Republican Party today is evolved from what you covered earlier in your career, this religious right-wing movement. And I think that's a really important question to ask you. You covered these people. You went to the rallies. You heard what they were saying. And so my really big question for you, I ask this of a lot of people, but I really want to know what Jeff Sharlet thinks about the insurrection, because I feel like if you were paying attention to what QAnon was saying, if you were talking to those people, listening to those people, going on those message boards, then January 6th was a date everybody was talking about. How surprised were you about what?
It was on the T-shirt on January 6th. They showed up on January 6th with like, "I'm here for the insurrection" T-shirts. I mean, yeah. I wrote something from Vanity Fair back in, was it June, when Trump had that Tulsa rally? Yeah. And at that time, everyone sort of looked at the Tulsa rally and like, not a lot of people showed up for it. He's a flop. He's waning, right? And they ignored the fact that more people watched that speech than any of his rally speeches ever, because they watched it online. But they also didn't pay attention to what the language was in that speech. He promised January 6th. He said, the title of the article is "You Know What to Do." That's what he says to his audience. He says, now, if they try some, crap like that the Democrats won, that's rigged. And if that happens, you know what to do. And I mean, the whole thing was a drumbeat of violence. He knows how to walk the line. He's like, the guy's like, he's got the sensibility of a stalker. He knows like just how much he can do without getting caught. Right?
That's one way. I think the best way to compare him to is a mafia don who he worked with, was friendly with, and was clearly influenced by.
Yeah, he knows how to avoid. It is, what to do is not, you should storm the Capitol. Right. It's collaborative.
But he did he did say, "Follow me to the Capitol. We're gonna walk over there. So come on." And then he got in his car and he went back to White House.
I know. Well, reports say that he actually did lest we impugn the 45th president.
No, go ahead, get it right.
He did want to go, but Aids said, maybe you personally shouldn't break the window and climb in. But let someone else do that work for you.
Someone hand me a brick. I'm not going to bend over.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, it was very open and it was happening. And what was just astonishes me now is the memory hole. I was listening to CNN.
I'm so glad I saw your tweet about this, and I wanted to change everything I want to talk to you about. Just talk about this. What Jeff is about to do is a media criticism, and he's one of the best people to do it. He is a Ivy League educated journalist. Go ahead with what?
No, I'm not Ivy League educated. I'm barely educated at all. I teach at an Ivy League.
Whatever. You teach it, and everybody that is in the Ivy League wants to talk to you. So I got it wrong technically, but go ahead.
Well, no, it's a point of pride. I didn't go there.
Okay, fair enough.
Harvard. Obvious, like everyone liked this on Twitter because it's obvious to them. Yeah. It's like someone, you're listening to CNN and they're like, so are these statements of interest in bipartisanship, are they sincere? I don't know. Let's discuss. Like, what the fuck? They just had a coup. No, the statement of bipartisanship is not sincere. And it's not sincere by the Democrats either.
This is the example of I got in a big argument with my friend Paul Rykoff, who's a veteran. I don't know how I describe him politically, but he talks about how CNN has moved so far to the left, and certainly you could talk about certain people at night, Don Lemon, whatever. But this is the kind of thing which is the really matters when they create these false equivalencies, and they talk, in this case, most importantly, they act like this party didn't promote the big lie, encourage everything you're just saying by saying, you wrote CNN this morning talking about whether declarations of interest and bipartisanship are sincere. This is insane, surreal, man in the high castle shit. One party just attempted a coup. Moments like this, I'm ashamed to ostensibly be in the same line of work as these memory holes. And it's a very popular tweet, and well done, sir.
And it shows that a lot of people are also looking at CNN and saying, what's happening here? And I have to say, if you tweet something like that, people are like, yeah, all these journalists are all so full of shit. And I'm like, no. I mentioned that I am a journalist. And my frustration is, look, CNN does do good journalism. I hate it when people attack like a whole entity where thousands of people are working and say, oh, that's just crap. People they don't like a New York Times article, so they cancel their subscription. Do you know how many people work at the New York Times? Right. You didn't like that byline. That's a failure of democratic thought, of understanding how media organs work. But that is happening. That's happening all over. We're going along as if nothing's happened. We're doing the same thing with the coup that we did with the 560,000 dead of the pandemic, which is we don't really know how to process this, so we won't.
Well, we'll just move on to whatever is next in our lives, really. But I think the really important point, I'm glad that I don't know where they published this, but like 150 former national security mainstream folks said from both parties, we've got to investigate January 6th. So we have to have major 9/11 Commission, Warren Commission style investigations, nonpartisan if that were even possible, not necessarily done in Congress, I think, of both the insurrection and the pandemic. Do you agree with that? Would you like to see that? Does it need to be done? How?
I mean, there's lots of things I think would be great if they were done. That's not going to happen.
Why not? Why is that not? We don't think there's going to be investigations on either of those?
Yeah, I think there'll be investigations. That would be nice. No, I think that fixes it. I think that fixes it. And look, it's a calculation. It's not. Why do we ignore the dead? And look, I mean, we ignore the dead. This was worse than any war. There was never a war in which 560,000 Americans were killed in a year. You don't. You had a great piece at Esquire called All That We've Lost. And so you have credibility on that criticism. You're not a hypocrite, at least. So what happened with that story is that right from the beginning, I was like, what's going on? Why are we not, wearing black armbands? Those of us who have hair can rip it out. We should be in mourning. And some countries did. If you looked at the Italian press, especially in that spring, the newspapers, remember, I've got it right here, keep it nearby. New York Times did at 100,000 deaths.
I have that too. I have that in here too. That's so interesting. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, people keep it. So they did that for one day. The Italian press did this day after day after day, as we did in 9/11, but we couldn't do now. And I think the numbers are so big, well, we can't keep talking about this. And my thought was, no, we really shouldn't be talking about anything else. And we didn't declare, that was Trump, right? And so we can put 90% of the blame on Trump. That still leaves 10% of the blame for the rest of us.
Do you think any of that is because of who the dead are, disproportionately older, less healthy minorities?
Yeah. Oh, I think it's partly that. It's partly that. If this disease had come in and killed 3,000 kids it did kill 3,000 kids, but they killed more than that. They were in the wave. If it had killed only 3,000 kids, we would have paid more attention.
You mentioned Reagan earlier. What we're saying here, it reminds me of the AIDS epidemic. They were mostly gay. So another, millions of people who you could just, is that fair comparison?
It is, except in as much as that the death toll here was so much bigger in a concentrated period of time. Yeah. And that's worth thinking about that, because now I think most of us are aware, retroactively, of what the scale of the AIDS epidemic was. And we're all aware of the scale of the pandemic and how it's meant that, it's really disrupted our youth soccer leagues for almost a year now. I can't go to the bar and hook up with someone. And actually, I take those things seriously. That's what I wanted to write in that piece, was all of this loss is real. And the ways in which people get into this hierarchy of loss and say, well, I haven't lost someone personally or something like that, so my loss is not as significant. That leads them into this kind of denial. I wonder how that works with the insurrection too. In the same way that you got now you get these Republicans saying, well, they didn't bring guns. It wasn't that big a deal. And that's maddening. But then you have to ask yourself, what has happened in that person's life? What kind of violence has been in their life that they can look at that insurrection and say, that's not so bad. These are all ways of reassuring yourself that the pain you've endured is not that big a deal by dismissing other pain, right? And you've got to start with saying, you know what, you loved your youth soccer league and you can't do that and you lost that. That's serious. That's serious. I interviewed my son for this story. I interviewed people who had lost all sorts of things to COVID and then picked 9 of them to tell in this one story. But I interviewed my son, who's 7 years old. He was, before the pandemic, he and his friends were digging a bunker behind their elementary school. And, now they can't do that anymore. And so they called it the battle hole. And he said, I lost the battle hole. And he lost the battle hole. He lost his, my stepmother, sort of his grandmother, to whom he was very close. Didn't die of COVID, but died this year. And we couldn't go see her and so on. And those things, in a 7-year-old's mind, are intermingled. But it's not just a 7-year-old. It's all of our minds in which we mingle these trivial things and the big things. Same is happening politically with the insurrection, with the 4 years of simmering fascism that we just went through, and which we are not done with. Like you said, the evolution of the party. The evolution of the party, as I write about the history of the right and so on, it was always, let's tiptoe up to the line. I even mistakenly wrote in a book called The Family, I had a chapter called The F Word. The F Word is fascism. And I said, that actually can't happen here. There's other kinds of bad, but I was wrong. It can. I thought we would always stay just on this side of the line. And now we're just over it. And one party is, I would argue, the Republican Party now is a fascist party. And people say that's ridiculous. They're not doing death camps and so on. There's fascist parties all over the world. There's a fascist party in Italy. There's a fascist party in Indonesia. They're not a fascist party in power, and they're not a genocidal fascist party. But their core ideology has now moved to fascism.
And fascism being the opposite of democracy in that they have one guy that they followed, and it didn't matter how he won. I should say every politician, it doesn't matter how they win. It's that they win, I think, is the simplest way to understand. I don't think a lot of people that are even supporting these politicians understand that. They don't care how they win because they're also told a story. And let me ask you, do you have any sympathy for the insurrectionists, much less anybody else, who believed the big lie? Because I do. I have sympathy for people who believe that their vote was stolen, didn't count, wasn't cast. I was ready to grab a pitchfork when the Michigan electors were going to take away black people's votes in Detroit and throw Michigan to Trump. I don't have a pitchfork, and I wouldn't leave the shed in actuality because everybody knows my truth. But I mean, I have sympathy for them that they're outraged. They thought that the election was stolen.
I like the thought of you going down to Home Depot and saying where's the pitchfork section?
Where's the revolution aisle?
Right. So there's some enterprising reporters you know what? I've actually noticed a significant uptick in the number of pitchforks. I'm joking, but there's actually a journalist who did an analysis in the Rwandan genocide that in the months before Rwanda, hardware stores started stocking far more machetes.
Well, we can just look at gun sales in America.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
different reasons. I mean,
there's a big conspiracy, but it just means that there's a culture that's bubbling, right?
Yeah.
I know this drives some people nuts, but I have lots of sympathy for these folks. I think, in fact, one of the ugly moments right now is this sort of thing we shouldn't even try and understand these characters. Well, that's my work. That's what I do. I think of it as empathy for the devil, not sympathy, right? I don't know if I have sympathy for them, but I have empathy. I understand. I want to understand how they came to that. And, there's a thing right now. A political scientist had a piece in the Washington Post. I think his name is Robert Pape, and it's getting a lot of attention because he says, I studied these guys and the 380 whatever who've been arrested. And I thought I was going to find economic anxiety as the major motive. Instead, I found that they were mostly from counties that had had significant drops in white population. And so they were driven by racial anxiety. And it's the word there that drives me nuts intellectually, democratically, is instead, because you are ignoring the history of racism and immigration in America if you think it's an either or. And the people who say it's really just economic anxiety, yeah, that's racism covering for, that's a sort of a racist covering for this sort of fear of non-white people. But the people who say, these people, why, they have a good living. He's a plumber, so he can't be economically, he can't have any economic anxiety. So he is motivated by pure and unadulterated hatred of race that has nothing to do with anything else. No, he's a jackass who thinks that his anxiety about whether he's going to pay his mortgage has something to do with the skin color of other people. He's a fool. He's wrong. There's no excusing it. But these things are in a mix. So we look at, my friend Peter Manseau had a good piece in the Washington Post on the first guy through the window, who in the year before this, Peter went back and looked at his Facebook. This guy was struggling. He was considered himself a very devout Christian, but he found himself getting so angry on Facebook. And so there would be these sort of cycles, saying angry and angry things, and then saying, I'm sorry, everybody. I don't know what it is. It's like Facebook just sort of knows how to get my goat, and it just feeds me the stuff. So I promise to you, I'm only going to be posting pictures of my kids and cute animal videos from now on. And then the politics would creep back in. And he was struggling. So he's not insane, by the way. He doesn't really understand the algorithm, but it's there. It was feeding him. He took the bait. He committed the crime. He should be held accountable. But how can I have sympathy for someone who knew that he was headed towards something and was trying not to do it? And the whole world around him, which in pandemic was so lot of it in social media, saying, no, throw that stone, break through that window. It'll be good for you.
Yeah. I want to read both those articles. They both, I hadn't read either one of them. Sounds fascinating. That there was an analysis even of the first almost 400 people that were arrested is interesting.
It is really interesting. Counties that have, where the white population has gone down most rapidly, whereas counties, very few of those who have been arrested come from counties that are just like all white, stable kind. They just didn't show up. I mean, maybe they're sort of like, I've got my white thing going fine here. I don't need to go to Washington. It's in changing counties that sent people.
That's what that was always kind of my working theory, that if things are going pretty well, you might yell and scream at your friends or on social media, but if things are going pretty well for you and your family, you're not going to Washington, D.C. You're not going anywhere, to a rally. You don't want to get arrested. You don't want to get hurt or killed. I think that's most people are mostly taught, but way too many people obviously are indignant about shit that isn't necessarily even happening. And these people all believe their president. So, I mean, the guy said over and over and over, it would be rigged. It was rigged, and go fight. And I mean, I like that sympathy for the devil idea. But where do you think this whole QAnon movement is now? What was this documentary, HBO documentary? Are you familiar with that?
I haven't watched it yet, so I don't know. But I mean, it's
revealing Q, and it seems like he's been quiet. And what's next for that movement? And do you agree, as we started earlier, that the QAnon movement is an outgrowth of the white evangelical movement that you covered for so long?
Outgrowth? Yeah, I guess I do. I think I do. And I think that's becoming more and more clear, although it was not limited to that. And that's part of what made it potent, is it could bring in, for instance, it brought in lots of people who didn't identify as religious. It was also, QAnon was particularly good at bringing in non-white people. And I think a lot of folks outside it didn't see that. It was sort of like, it could sort of get a tentacle into any kind of conspiracy theory, right? And so it could appeal to Black folks who, with very good cause, have reason to be suspicious of the government, who don't trust vaccines with good reason, with historical precedent, right? And so QAnon can make inroads with that. I think QAnon as such blew up. And I think in as much as that we're hearing now about, there's this crazy or that crazy, as such, it blew up. But the ethos of it, that's just going to reform. I mean, this is just like, think of your, if you got a swarm of mosquitoes and you kind of wave a stick at them to get them out of the way. And then they scatter and they reform in this new swarm. We're not done yet. And this is sort of the frustrating thing that such an astonishing number of people, and I hear people all the time saying, well, I just needed a break after Trump. We just needed a break. And I want to say, tough luck. I want to say, in the middle of World War II, we didn't just say, you know what, Hitler is exhausting us. I just need a break. We're just going to, the threat's still there. Yeah. You got to keep showing up. It's not fair that we have to keep showing up, but we do. That threat hasn't diminished. And I think political folks know that it's barreling toward us in 2022.
But I feel like, some of the data on this, the research isn't great because I guess it's psychology or whatever, but I'm talking to this guy, Stephen Hassan, who's an expert on cults. You familiar with him? He's a really nice guy, and I find him fascinating. But, some people argue that once the prophecy that you've been told for maybe your whole life or certainly a long time doesn't come, the date, the end of the world. I covered one of those for CNN, and I'll never forget talking to those folks, of which you covered extensively. But in this case, the election, Trump will win. Trump will be, he didn't win, but he's going to be placed in the office, from My Pillow guy to others, repeating these things. But when they don't happen, some of the research says that's what changes people. And I don't know if your mosquito cloud metaphor, is it accurate to everyone? Don't some of them just go like, I can't buy this shit anymore. It's been wrong.
Yeah, but the question is like, what is the number? You need to get rid of a lot of those mosquitoes to prevent it from performing. Yeah. You don't need everybody to come back. You need just enough to get the buzz going again. And now people are like, yeah, actually, I guess that was kind of interesting. I think this is something Trump knows. I think he'd love to still be on Twitter and getting more attention than he does, but I think he also knows that he can come back and he can pretty much restart that. That it's dormant. It's not dead. It's like, do you see that terrifying news? They thought Ebola was gone, and then someone who had been like Ebola free for 6 or 7 years suddenly has it again and is passing on. That's where it's at. And that's where the fascist virus is at now in the United States, but it's not even that dormant. I mean, it's like, and it's also shaping things that, look, this is the thing that's driving me nuts. Because Trump is 90% or whatever it is responsible for the pandemic, we don't look at the stupid decisions that the Biden administration, which is handling it just 1,000 times better. But still, when I see a headline that says, new cases being driven by schools not a safety concern, say officials. This is a Boston Globe headline. Yeah. That's nonsense. That's nonsense. That's doublespeak. That's the Biden administration trying to split the difference. Jonathan Chait in New York Magazine says, oh, isn't it great? He's schooling the left. He's really showing the teachers' unions who's in charge. How about we fucking show the virus the awful respect that we need to show it and say, virus, you're real. This is not a matter of opinion. And so that stuff that's happening, and that's also just sets fascism up. They're like, you know what? Those people who fall away, they're going to say, yeah, but Biden's full shit too. So if I have full shit Biden or full shit fascism, which hits all these pleasure centers in my head, I think I'll go over here.
Well, what do you think of the movement, the fascist movement in America, if the Biden administration is able to get huge things done through major government spending, and people see things in their lives get materially better? Materially? Is that a word? What word would you have used? If you see your life getting better, yeah. Is that kind of thing, does it combat the fascist movement? The thoughts that seed that movement?
I think there's a historical precedent for saying yes and saying that's the best bet. And that's why it seems sort of interesting and that Biden, Democrats are always saying, why are Democrats so mealy-mouthed? Go all in, roll over Joe Manchin any way you can, as quickly as you can, get as much as you can. Don't worry about people being pissed at you. And that is what FDR did. And what people don't pay attention to, and this is sort of like the history of the right where I started, is you look in the 1930s, it was by no means a given that democracy was going to survive in America. And there was a real possibility of communism, of real revolution. There was congressmen who were open fascists in the 1930s who was like, yeah, fascism is the way. They would say democracy is done. It's clearly exhausted. Look at our messed up country, but look at Germany. Now that's a place that's got the trains running on time. It's only the aftermath of World War II that makes us think that was unthinkable, but it wasn't unthinkable then. I mean, this is sort of the plot of Philip Ross. The plot against America? What if Charles Lindbergh wins as president? That wasn't crazy, and he wasn't the only one. It wasn't the flu. So right now, yeah, huge spending. Spend it all. There is no rainy day. You're not saving for the future. There is no future. Get the money out there, change people's lives, and that can inoculate us against fascism for a long time.
It's interesting. I'm glad I asked you that, because I think that's I think that's the solution in a way. Make people's lives better.
Yeah. Wow. It's so complicated. Wait a minute. If we do good things for people,
but it is complicated because I don't know. Maybe I'm not. I don't know. I don't want to compare my ideology to yours. I have no idea. But like, I'm not as cynical certainly about Democratic politicians, because I've been covering it for the last 15 years. And I specifically think a lot about comprehensive immigration reform, comprehensive healthcare reform. Healthcare went through and made people's lives better. And immigration reform didn't go through, and we still have huge problems. But the point is, they had the right ideas. And so when the right ideas actually get passed, when you don't have to deal with these stupid rules in the United States Senate, people's lives do get better as a result of, looking at Obamacare. I feel like is the best example of that.
Yeah, it is. And they don't get as better as you wanted them to. And I think, and it's the job of the left to complain, and they should, right?
Sure. Yes. Fine.
But it's, if you're sort of looking at this bigger picture, like Obamacare is in many ways a disappointment, like all big policy initiatives are. It wasn't like in the middle of the Great Depression. We go back and they look at FDR. People were constantly the left was always disappointed in FDR, and they said this wasn't enough, and you promised so much more. It's what you can do. It'll all shrink in the wash, but you gotta.
But just to be super clear and use myself as an example, Obamacare saved my family. It is as much as we needed after I lost my job in corporate media. It was there because I live in New York State, especially Medicaid expansion. All of that is all a lot of people need, certainly healthy people that, and I just see these policies, if they pass, if this infrastructure bill passes, there's going to be no denying the results, because you're going to see them. You're all going to see them. I think that's really important. Let me just ask you, though, because I want to get your take on what we're seeing with the voter suppression laws and the history of that. All of that ties into everything that you've covered as well. And we can talk about the white evangelical movement. We can describe, but it's also a white supremacist, white nationalist movement as much as anything else. I think you would probably agree, but how would you phrase that? And what do you think of these laws that now not only Georgia, but tons of other states are passing these laws? I think they're going to backfire, but what do you think of all of it?
I mean, we think they're going to backfire, but that is partly also, I think, that we're both in sort of a media sphere where lots of people are very upset about this, and we forget that the vast majority of voters don't even know this happened. So they're just going to show up to vote, and they're not going to be able to, or something's going to get in the way. I think of this woman, a black woman in Texas, who she just sentenced to 5 years in prison. She, in 2016, she went to vote. Her mother said, "You've got to vote." She wasn't really a voter. She didn't pay attention. She had served some prison time, but that wasn't on her mind. She goes and they say, "Oh, you're not on the rolls, but here's a provisional ballot," right? Provisional ballot is not counted. It's like, if we're not sure if we should count you, fill it out and we'll figure it out. So she says, "Okay, sure, that's fine." And then they went after her and sentenced her to 5 years in prison. This woman didn't know that Texas had already been pursuing this disenfranchisement for many years. And that what's happening now to the broader population is what these right-wing states have been doing by targeting formerly incarcerated populations for a long time. Formerly incarcerated, majority non-white populations. This is not a new Jim Crow. This is an expansion of Jim Crow. So I think it's going to backfire. I love the thought of like they can make all the strict rules they want and tens of millions of people saying, you know what, even though these are bullshit rules, we will meet every requirement and showing up. And that's sort of a romantic idea. It's a good idea. It's a Stacey Abrams idea. Maybe it will happen. I don't want to underestimate the power of local politics, which can be really nasty. And you're right. Just the fact that it's not happening only in Georgia, it's happening in New Hampshire. In New Hampshire, what they're targeting, I live in Vermont, across rivers, New Hampshire, they're targeting college students. We don't have a big non-white population in New Hampshire, but there's still these people who don't seem to vote right. So we've got to fix that. And it's the students who aren't voting right. That's 12% of voters. It's some huge numbers. They're trying to say you can't vote in this state. And so but that's not getting national attention. That's not getting national attention. New Hampshire's not a lot of electoral votes. There's all kinds of initiatives right now happening all over the place. That's what I mean to say. I don't say it's a done deal. I don't say they're going to win, but I'm going to say this fight's not over.
Lindsey Graham said yesterday that he's sick and tired. He's sick and tired of all this talk about racism, and it's crazy that he said, it's crazy that my friend Joe Biden is saying Jim Crow. That's just crazy talk. Now, I've got to get back to shooting my gun, making a honey-baked ham. But, like, people are pushing back on the rhetoric of saying, Margaret Hoover did it on this show, on the podcast the other day. Joe Scarborough is outraged. People are outraged that they're saying that this is Jim Crow, or as the president cringely said, Jim Eagle. Who wrote nobody wrote that is the
it's not Jim Eagle or whatever. It's not some evolution. That Jim Crow didn't go away. It's still there. No one who's ever done any reporting, for instance, on prisons and the massive increase in incarceration thinks that Jim Crow ever went away. What's happening now is, for all sorts of reasons, it's becoming visible to people who either didn't see it or didn't want to see it before. And that's embarrassing for a figure like for Joe Scarborough, right? Who was one of those who's not seeing it, but it's his job to see things.
Yes.
So it's like, holy shit. The reason I didn't see it, the reason I didn't bring you this news is because it's not true. Instead of, you know what? I was wrong. I didn't see it.
I have the least respect for someone like him because he's definitely changed his opinions on a lot, because he can't not. He's not that obtuse that sitting next to Eddie Glaude Jr. every day is not going to have an effect on him. It does have an effect on him, but there's still no excuse when you're talking to that many smart people. But I don't even believe he's genuine about a lot of what I think he's just doing creating binaries to get ratings and conflict shit.
Well, the only thing I disagree with you there is the word just. I mean, like,
fair enough. No, it's outrageous. I'm outraged by it. I'm indignant by it. It's just, it's cable news. It's pretty simple to describe. I was part of it for a long time.
Yeah, although don't you think that there's a certain number of people who reassure themselves by knowing, look, we know behind the scenes that some of these Republicans, we know that lots of them can't stand Trump, that many of them are happy to see Matt Gaetz go down and so on, right? And people reassure themselves with that. Just as, and I don't want to be too, I will be heavy-handed, just as they reassured themselves in Germany German elites also thought that Hitler was an idiot. If you go back and you look at German press coverage from the time, it's all about, can you believe this joke? This joke is in power. That's not going to last long, right? But since he's here, let's get some shit done. And I don't find that reassuring at all, right, because that's the structure. There's always going to be people who know better, or they don't know better, they know differently, but they will go along. And what we're seeing right now, I guess what is to go back to this is so scary to me. There was this moment when suddenly people were like, wait a minute, shrill shriekers like Sharlet, who said there's a coup in the works here. Maybe that was right. Maybe coup is the right word for this. Maybe the F word is real, fascism is real, and so on. There was this period around the insurrection, and even before, as we moved up to it, where people were like, oh yeah, no, this is real. And it's sort of like we see a different kind of swarm. We see the swarm of media consensus reforming around the center will hold.
Yes. Yep. And that's nothing outrage. I don't think anything outrages me more. And I'm so glad that you wrote that tweet about it and then we talked about it. But I don't think I did. I don't know if I did get an answer from you because you went back to the insurrection, and I'll let you go here, Jeff. I love talking to you. But were you surprised by January 6th? I mean, you did actually answer it. You weren't, because they were wearing T-shirts. But
yeah, I wasn't. No, it's like one of those things that was I surprised. On the one hand, I was like one of those people who was sort of saying, they're saying they're going to do this, Yeah. And then I was actually just watching TV at the time, and I'm like, they're doing it, and you shouldn't have been surprised.
Yeah.
But it was still, I remember my wife was out with our kids, and I was like texting her the blow by blow of like, you're not going to believe this. And she, to her credit, my wife's a historian, modern American historian. She was like, well, yeah, but, didn't you think they would do this? She wasn't as shocked as I was.
It's funny you say that, because my wife is a health coach and a yoga teacher, and she wasn't surprised either. She's always absolutely never surprised. Thought Trump would win the first time. She thought he would win the second time. He almost did. And she certainly wasn't surprised by the insurrection, because certain people watch things in a certain way, I suppose. But a lot of people did see that coming, regardless of.
I don't mind holding on to my surprise, though, and I think this is one of the things we got to do is you got to both anticipate these incursions on democracy and maintain your sense of shock and horror.
Yes, well said. But I will say I'm happy that when people break into the Capitol building of the United States of America or into another state, they go to jail, or they get arrested. I mean, we can quibble about how it's not quibble. We really should scream about how it's all going down and so on. But I do feel like people aren't going to break into the Michigan Capitol right now. Like this is a good cooling measure.
It's not a good time for Capitol breaking into. That's not that season. We'll wait till next year. But there was I wish I could remember the name of this tech reporter, because I thought this was such a good insight. And I haven't seen it. It was a tech reporter writing about, the irony of QAnon and all these right wingers and their anxiety about this so-called deep state. Is they're not wrong. The deep state is real. It just wasn't paying attention to them. There was this massive surveillance project that since 9/11 has been fairly obsessed with Islam and all sorts of forms around the world. Yep. We said the bad news for these guys is suddenly this great federal machine of millions of employees. It's a slow turning ship, but now it's looking at you. And we've seen this, with these 380 arrests. Some of them are pretty sophisticated arrests. Like they track these folks down.
Yeah, no, I think
this is big government, and it's a little bit scary. It is, and it's a bad time to be a member of a white supremacist organization, because you can be positive that at least a third of your fellow members are undercovers.
Which a third might be a lot, but what you're saying is I completely agree. Merrick Garland's no joke on this either. I don't think.
Yeah. Yes.
I mean, they were watching mosques in New Jersey because one guy, rented a bin Laden video. But he may or may not do something. And if he might do something, by the way, they gave him a fucking fake bazooka and then arrested him for it. But these guys aren't hiding. They have cabins and recruiting billboards and shit. And so the idea that the federal government or national security apparatuses at any level might be looking at them, even though a lot of them are working in those law enforcement agencies.
That's a problem too, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they benefited from whiteness, and that's the thing. Even now, like when they're arrested, like I can't believe you're arresting me.
We're on the same side, dude.
That says I was there. January 6th. Did you see this story?
No, wait. Which one is he?
This guy, when the FBI showed up at his door, I can't remember his name. He was wearing a T-shirt that said, "I was there, January 6th, insurrection." And then he's like, "How did you find me?" So there's some of that, but then there's some of it that is more subtle. And there's also, look, we should be alert to, just in the way that post 9/11, there was massive civil liberties violations. Of Muslims and people who were Muslims that our government was too dumb at the time. It's like Sikhs, that's the same thing, right? No, listeners, it's not. But I don't know where the line is. I am wary. Like I do want the undercovers to be there at the white supremacist organization. I am worried about the tendency to use this moment to expand, at a point where on the one hand, we're over here, we're talking about defunding the police, right? Some people are talking about defunding the police or cutting back police. And on the other hand, we're talking about what will be a massive expansion.
I struggle with that. I think everybody should struggle with security and privacy and the national security, what it's able to do. But I also would be a hypocrite to say I haven't always been arguing for it, taking a serious look at what the actual threat matrix is, national security wise, and then focus on that. And you don't need battleships and foreign assets and bases. If really the threat is going to be at the local abortion clinic, and we've seen so much more terrorism in being committed by white men than brown men, period. Like everybody that's been covering that and has known that forever. So I'm all for putting a lot more emphasis on these people, the white supremacists all over the country.
Oh, I am too. When I say like I'm wary about civil liberties and so on.
No, it's nuanced.
I don't want to. I want people arrested for actually doing shit. I don't want people, but I think that line, and you're right, it's been so underreported and under examined. I think Merrick Garland seems like a good guy for this job, but you're right. There's also my friend Janet Reitman has a Rolling Stone, not the New York Times magazine, but has a new book coming out about white supremacism and military and the police. I remember my very first reporting job, 1993, the San Diego Reader, all weekly. The Reader. I'm covering courts martial at the local. I just sit there and listen to the courts martial. One day there's a case, a sailor, just top of the line sailor. This guy is perfect, just as perfect as a sailor, perfect as a human being, but inexplicably he has stabbed another sailor. He's a black guy named Andre Sparks. The white guy that he stabbed is just a piece of shit, on paper, and in real life, he's worse. And I'm just trying to figure out what is going on here. And they ended up, there was no other reporters there. No one cared about this case. Four whatever it was, JAD captains or whatever, who went wherever I went to make sure I didn't ask too many questions. Oh, wow. I was like 20-year-old reporters, don't worry, I'm too dumb to ask any good questions. What it did turn out to be was a white supremacist gang on aircraft carriers, which at that time and probably still had huge problems with the white supremacist gangs. And they were targeting this guy until one day he snapped. The white sailor was a neo-Nazi, and this black guy just one day hit back. And the Navy was so terrified of this getting out because they didn't want it to blow up further. So they were just going to cover it up, which of course allows it to keep going. They had a don't ask, don't tell policy for white supremacism. And I think that's probably still there.
The most undercovered element of our military, and it's because it's so difficult to talk about, is the rape culture and the white supremacy. I mean, the sexual assault and rape in the military is so horrific, and so is often the racism, and it just gets covered up by jingoism and all kinds of other bullshit. But those are really, so I'm excited for Janet's book, and I know her and admire her, so I'm looking forward to that. And I'll let you go. I mean, I could talk to you forever. Jeff, one of my favorite people to read, to talk to follow on Twitter. Thank you so much for joining me again.
Thank you, Pete. Good talking with you.
All right, there he goes, Jeff Sharlet. How about that conversation? Wasn't he great? Isn't he passionate and, I don't know, so human and interesting? Get all his books, watch the Netflix series on, watch the Family on Netflix is what I'm trying to tell you. And please go on Twitter. He's very active on Twitter, and say, I loved hearing you at Stand Up with Pete. He's Jeff Sharlet, 1 R, 1 T, at Jeff Sharlet. That would be huge because I love talking to him. I just, that guy is so great, and his work, his books, everything. All right, so now it's time to move on to another great guest who joins me every other week or so. He's a regular here on Stand Up. He's also a member of our community. He shows up often at the Hangouts, and I always love having him on as a guest. He has 2 podcasts, by the way, and you should listen to and subscribe to both of them. They are Righteous Prick and Making Podcasts Great Again. And he has Bradley Whitford on this week, which is really cool, from West Wing and so much more. Very excited to hear that interview. Also, you can see him performing. He's got a bunch of dates in New Jersey and New York and Washington, D.C. Go to his website, jlcauvin, CAUVIN.com. Rockville, Maryland in May as well. And get tickets and go see him and go say hello. I always love talking with him. He does a hilarious impression of Andrew Cuomo, distracting from his scandals by legalizing weed that I put him up to. We have a great conversation all over the place as always. I hope you enjoy my latest with @JLCauvin right now. All right, I've got JL Cauvin on the video link up, and I'm hoping that we can get more background noise during this week's interview than we did a couple weeks ago, because that was an editing goddamn nightmare.
Can you please not make noise for the next 20 minutes? Thank you.
Why do you do your tapings in your common space? Why don't you go somewhere else and leave? Let her live her life.
I understand that your wife rules the home, but in a land I call Alpha Dogville, I go where
She's
I
making
want,
more
when
noise.
I want.
She just poured M&Ms into a popcorn bowl. She's going to make microwave popcorn right now and sacrifice a baboon. What is happening? She hates me.
No, she hates me.
What is?
By the way, the best thing I can tell you is I recently got back on Facebook against all good judgment.
Oh,
because
that surprises me.
It surprised me too, because I needed to. We talked about this off mic, but I operate under the mindset of my window is constantly closing.
Yeah.
And I said, you know what? I need to get as much traction everywhere as possible right now as I try to book gigs and promote gigs. And so I saw on my girlfriend's Facebook page that she had shared, I don't know which major national publication was writing about me that week.
Could have been the Washington Post or the Daily Beast or the LA Times. All of them
It might have been LA Times, which was probably the best write-up of me. And she posted it to her page. And I noticed on her page, which I haven't been on Facebook since 2018. And she wrote her comment over it was, "This is my daily humor, ... And that ellipsis at the end, that ... was basically, fuck this guy." Like, as I'm
Is that
getting
right? She should be able to have a voice if she's right there. I don't think that's what she meant by it.
No, she laughed. She laughed the minute I called her on it, because she was like, it was the idea of, hey, the world likes having his jokes 2 minutes every day. I get to hear him talking to himself for 8 hours a day and then doing voices that are annoying and testing out voices. Like, for half a day, I walked around the apartment before I filmed my first Chappelle video, just talking like Dave Chappelle to rough up the voice. I don't know who puts more effort into unpaid free content than me. Like, I'm like, I got to get this Chappelle.
Come on, you're doing very well. You made a lot of money this year, especially on Cameo, and it's all because of these impressions. You're saying that the Chappelle impression itself hasn't made money? What are you talking about? And do you ever walk around as Mitch McConnell?
I have tried to convince her to do a character called Madge McConnell. Because she wears glasses, and then we could do it's Mitch and his sister Madge. And I was like, that would be such a force multiplier on social media. Do you know what I mean? Like, but she's a very like, I'll let you be the idiot who tries to get everybody's attention, and I just will live my life quietly.
Now, so you're back on Facebook. You sold out. I think that's fine. But I think it's a little bit, you went really far. You also opened a Parler account.
I did. I kind of want to get on Parler just to see what it's about.
I think it's gone.
Oh, really? Already?
Does Donald Trump have any chance of ever being on social media or having the type of impact and influence that he did when he was tweeting all day long? It's over, right? It's over for him. He will never have his voice multiplied the way that most people can, frankly, ever again, right? It's done.
I believe it's
interesting.
But Mike Pence got a 2-book deal today. How about that?
Well, what do you make of that? I mean,
one book for the bookshelf and another one for the closet.
Oh, I didn't.
No, I think I think Donald Trump. The most fascinating article to me that I've read recently is the one about him basically grifting his own supporters, the donations, where it was like, I was rooting for his supporters to get robbed blind, and I guess I got my wish. But yeah, I think I don't know. We're in a very weird place because I think there's such a commitment. I think Joe Biden is doing quite the job right now, and I just think there's this like. Politics has become religion, and I took Charles Barkley to task for what I viewed was I actually did a Charles Barkley video today. Charles Barkley getting interviewed for a job by Donald Trump.
I haven't seen it.
It's one of those things where I don't think it's a both sides issue. I think, of course, there's people on the left who are so dedicated to
what did he say? What happened?
It was like an out of context, like during one of the games, he was like, Ernie, I think that, let me be honest with you. I think that politicians just want to divide people. I think most white people and black people, I honestly believe this. I think they're good people. But Republican and Democrat do this. And he was making this like useless argument that like politicians are politicians. But I was like, you really think that the both sides argument is super useful right now when one party is trying to stop the Democrats and the black people of Georgia from voting? Like, is this the time to bring up? Of course, yes, politicians suck. There's a time and place for that kind of a statement. And when one party is trying to stop black people from voting, I don't think that's the time, because as I always say, the Republicans are always in the market for a both sides suck argument because they're constantly down 40 with 3 minutes to go in the game. And then if the ref, Charles Barkley, just declares,
right,
you know what, both teams suck, game over. It's a 4 tie.
And I talked about that with Jeff Sharlet as well. And he was talking about, CNN was saying, are Democrats really trying to work with Republicans? But, again, before we talk about Republicans passing laws to suppress the vote, not only black folks, but apparently young folks in New Hampshire, whoever might be a Democrat, you have to also remember this is a party where most of them bought and sold the big lie that the election was rigged and then supported, cheered on the insurrection and did not vote. We're talking about Congress to impeach Donald Trump. So those other two major sins, transgressions, are enough that we shouldn't be comparing the two parties.
Right.
Here's your Charles Barkley interviewing for a job with Donald Trump. I think I can play it.
Oh, cool.
Look, Ernie.
Excuse me, not Ernie. Donald.
Kenny.
Who the hell is Kenny? It's Donald Trump.
Donnie, I've said this before, and I think that Donald Trump is an idiot. But I will say, I think that there are both problems on Democrat side and Republican. I truly believe that.
So you don't mind that it was my supporters that ran through the Capitol and my supporters who are trying to take away African-American votes in Georgia? You're totally cool with that?
Look, I said what I'm going to say. I think it's both sides. No matter what you tell me.
That's a beautiful thing. I'm proud to announce that Director of African-American Communications for Donald J. Trump is now Sir Charles Barkley, and we'll see what happens.
And we'll see what happens. Director of African-American communications. That was hilarious and would have been that much better if your girlfriend didn't turn on the television as loud as possible.
It turned on by itself. I think I think I'm in the middle of a Poltergeist reboot.
Oh, really?
So, if you don't hear from me after tonight, I'm in the TV or dead.
Have you ever seen
And you'll still say there's no such thing as the JL jinx.
Have you ever seen a ghost?
I have one story. When I was a child, probably 4 years old, and I maintain that, it's one of those things where I'm sure there's an explanation, but I don't know it. So in my head, it's still true. Something under my bed grabbed my foot. That's it. That's the story.
That's terrifying. How old?
I was no older than 5. So of course there's some other, it caught in a blanket, but to this day, I remember it being like, what grabbed my foot from under the bed? And I checked the next morning. I was like, there's nothing under my bed.
Oh, that's terrifying. But that's more a monster than a ghost.
That's true. So have I ever seen a ghost? I have never seen a ghost. No, the answer is no. So I believe in monsters, but not ghosts.
Ghosts don't hang out under beds. Monsters do.
Okay. Well, maybe this was a trans monster that identifies as a ghost.
Could be possible. Could be possible.
Here's a thing I'd like to bring up because I wrote this down and I was laughing at this week's episode of This Is Us. Because it feels like they always try to cram in. They want to be representative of every single, like they want this one family to touch every social issue. And so now one of the daughters of one of the main characters has a non-binary 8th grade person friend. I don't know a they friend.
Yep.
And every time they say they, I laugh. And this is one of those things where it's one of those issues where it's like you want to tread lightly because you don't want to be on the side of the types of comedians that just dismiss everything about that community as BS. But at the same time, I want to say, so if I respect your right to be called a they, how you identify, I got to still be allowed to, and I don't know in my head, I'm like, it's got to be okay, though, to make fun of the fact that you refer to yourself as a plural. In other words, do you know, like, in other words, it seems like, I guess that to some people, that would be a punching down. But I'm like, so are you excluding, and then you get into the thing of like, so wait, so now the way to treat you nicely is to exclude you from comedy, even on the most basic thing?
The thing that I don't like about they is what you said. It's plural, and I want to call you and refer to you, anyone, however they want to be referred to. But it doesn't make sense in my mind to say that. I will keep forgetting, and then you'll penalize me and punish me. Refer to them as they. Refer to her as they. Like, I'm going to forget because it doesn't make sense. They is more than one person.
Right.
You're one person. I don't care how you identify. You're still one person, not two people. We're not there yet.
See, and that's why I'm pushing for them to be called it.
Now that's dehumanizing, of course.
No, and I'm joking, but at the same time, I think that's why. Because we only have 3 words. We have a he, a she, and an it. Like going back to like elementary school, it's either a he, she, or
going
a
back
thing.
to if you don't know the gender of someone's pet, your dog that was just barking, what is it? How old is it? You don't know. That would be it. Wouldn't, but you don't want to do that to a human.
So that's why I think they is sort of it's there is no third option.
Yeah,
I'd be interested if we invent a third option.
No, we can't. They have to. But they
now, when
should.
you say they, do you mean one person or do you mean the community?
I don't even know, but I know that.
I am going to do an Abbott and Costello bit and get myself canceled called They're on First.
Yeah, no, they will have to come up with it. I
know they're on first, but there's only allowed to be one guy on first. That's what I'm saying. They're on first. Then it's on second. That's dehumanizing.
Well done. Well done. Speaking of it, Matt Gaetz, thoughts?
Prayers, mostly. No, Matt Gaetz. I'm going to make a comparison. I just watched a 6-part documentary on HBO on Q.
Oh, good. I'd like to hear your thoughts on it. I have not seen it, but I've heard a lot about it. So go ahead. I mean,
exhausting. And I'm not saying as a critique of the filmmaker. You're watching this stuff going, isn't it exhausting, like trying to even keep up and believe this shit? Because I'm exhausted just watching it going, oh my God, like, don't you have a job? Like, is there a job that takes some of your time away from being like, Q just dropped another note. We've got to see what this means. Like, it feels exhausting to just be in that world, let alone
does the documentary, it's a really interesting point. Does the documentary follow Q followers and their daily lives to kind of show you how much time they are spending?
No, but that you can tell that it's kind of an all-consuming passion for some of the people.
I don't know anything about
some of them are successful Q-tubers, as they were known, like who have like 200,000 subscribers, and they post videos, and they basically reveal.
Hold on, that's the kind of thing that does really make me upset about my own career. But let me take a moment. Okay, Go ahead.
But the way I feel about the Republican Party, like Matt Gaetz, to me, the reason I brought that up is that they give me the same feeling of exhaustion, where I'm like, I can't believe we're even taking these people serious. Like, we have to. They're Congress people. They have power. But it's like the idea that Matt Gaetz, and this isn't to let the other assholes off the hook, the rank and file Republicans who just simply vote with Donald Trump and but the Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boeberts, Matt Gaetz is the real extreme personalities. Mo Brooks, who I guess is going to be a senator from Alabama, which is a fucking disgrace.
We can keep going. Jim Jordan, Ted Cruz, Lindsey Graham.
But you just watch them and you go, why are we why are these even how are these even serious people? Forget power. I'm like, how are these people not a fucking joke at this point? Like, and I don't mean joke, I mean like any serious person on any side of the aisle is just like Ted Cruz, zero integrity, zero likability. Jim Jordan, you're a joke. You're an angry little joke. Matt Gaetz, you're a douche, I don't even, like, it's so bizarre. It's so bizarre that like the tent of the Republican Party feels like small and yet a diverse group of shit. Like, in other words, they've got 18 varieties of like terrible, stupid people. So there's like almost this weird, you've got your Ted Cruz, your Ted Cruz, Josh Hawleys, like the ambitious geniuses who suck. Then you've got Matt Gaetz, somehow like a douchey pedophile frat bro is also welcome with the like intellectual scammers. Then you've got your Jim Jordan, you're like angry fighters who who accomplish nothing. You know, it's this weird, and then you've got your certifiable crazies, the Boebert,
Louis Gohmert,
where you're like, where you're just like, good God, what do we like? What the Democrats have to worry about? Like, well, we have a big tent. We have black people, gay people, moderates, liberals, and then the Republicans are like, we just have everybody who fits under the umbrella of we don't like Democrats. So it's like this weird, smaller but very diverse tent in its own lunacy.
So the other thing about a lot of the people that you mentioned that we've been mentioning, I tweeted about this the other day, and I'm awful on Twitter, and I meant Gaetz, but I listed a number of the men that we just mentioned, and I meant to write Gaetz, but it auto-corrected me as Gretzky, and I tweeted it out. I said Cruz and Jim Jordan and Gretzky, and yeah. But the point is, these guys are morally repulsive, terrible people in so many ways. And sure, I think you could throw in plenty of progressives and liberals, and we'll name those names. I think Andrew Cuomo's an insufferable guy, and for so many reasons. I would
like to start a crisis management firm where I get hired by Andrew Cuomo, and what I would say is we are at DEF CON McGreevy. which means
that you're going back though.
Yeah,
the governor of New Jersey.
You have to come out and say you're gay. That's the only way to change the narrative at this point. Is you have to change your orientation.
One way that he changed the narrative for sure is the marijuana law.
Oh yeah, no, he is. You know,
can you do Andrew Cuomo changing the narrative by just giving us weed? I mean,
so I see that there are more allegations. I don't. You will see that these will not be correct. Oh, what's that? Is that free marijuana legal for everybody starting right now? Please pass it out to all the reporters. Please, you guys can be first to smoke up. So I'm assuming can we pass out the chips and some snacks for people? They're going to need some snacks later. Possible ventilator if they inhale too much. So, yes, if there are no more questions, I'm going to go back to my residence and plot the destruction of certain interns who have said nasty things about me.
That's good. Very good. All right. What else? What else did I want to ask you?
About my fall.
Oh, yes. You have all these scrapes all over your hands because you took a stumble. And what happened, pal?
And anybody, I guess I can plug my stuff at the end, but I give a very robust, the last 24 on my podcast is like 15 minutes of me describing falling and
really? Oh gosh, I got to go listen to
how it basically felt like just a new low point for my life. I was going for
your
podcast,
Righteous Prick.
Yes. I was going for, and on Making Podcasts Great Again this week, we have 3-time Emmy winner Bradley Whitford going head to head with the president.
Oh, what? You actually got Bradley Whitford on the show?
Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic. He is one of my all-time favorite interviews.
Yeah, he was great. And 2 weeks ago we had Richard Marks, so I'm starting to plug into the
that's great, buddy. I'm so
Whitford
glad.
Was great.
Yeah.
But we so I talk about it. I basically have decided my knee. I have a hurt knee. I'm overweight, so I said, you know what? I haven't been getting up like I used to. For like 6 a.m. Go to the gym before work. Let me start rebuilding those habits. Let me just start getting up. I don't have to go for a run or lift weights. Let me just go for like a nice brisk 4-mile walk. Okay. So I did that Easter Sunday before Mass. I went for like a 7 a.m. 4-mile walk, was drenched. I said, okay, this will get me back into the habit. For the next month, I'll be in the habit of waking up, working out in some capacity, just baby steps. Well, on walk number 2, Monday morning, I go out and I'm about 0.9 miles into my 4-mile walk and I trip. And if anybody saw me, it must have been hilarious. I can admit that. Like, it wasn't just a trip, fall, injury. It was trip, stumble. And in my head, I'm going, I'm going to catch myself. Jeez, I can't believe it. Wait, I'm not catching myself. What the fuck? What am I doing? Oh my God, I'm fat and not athletic and tired from my long walk yesterday and just collapsed, ripping the palms of my hands on the sidewalk because they're dry from all the fucking year of antibacterial soap and Purell. Skin up my knee, which my dog has repeatedly been trying to lick like I'm Head Wound Harry from SNL.
I love that sketch.
And so now I'm on day 3 of like nursing walking injuries. And I know you think I'm too negative on a lot of stuff, and I probably am. But there is a moment where I just say, so let me get this straight. I am now at the level of fitness and age where I have to be careful while walking. Like maybe walking was too big a step for me to go for.
No.
I'm not. 10 years ago, throughout my 20s and 30s, it was a thing with women I dated that they would see me trip, but I never fell. Like, in other words, they'd see me somehow just like hit a ledge, but I never fell. I never even stumbled. It was just like the body control. It was just like, boop, but I didn't fall. Now, a little bit of a fall is like, I think I might die on this walk.
I am sorry to hear that, but the question is, because what does physics tell us about if you fall from 8 feet, which is your height, versus falling from 5'7", my height.
Plus the weight, plus the additional weight.
And you're a little overweight. So does that mean that you're going to have more injuries than me because I'm short and tight and fit?
Well, I don't know about your asshole. You can leave that out. But everything else, yes, probably. I think you're going to say, what does Fezzik tell us? Because, like an Andre the Giant Princess Bride joke. Oh, when I fall, I break. I don't really do a good Andre the Giant.
No, I got it.
So now I'm, I got to rehab before I can walk.
No, you don't.
Power walk.
No, you're fine. Get back out there tomorrow and report back to us. And if you fall again, it's called content.
Yeah, no, that's true. But I am not kidding. I am going to do. This should get me canceled before I even I'm going to get pre-canceled. That's my goal. Before I actually get a show, I'm going to get pre-canceled. I want to do
don't do it on my show. Don't take me down with you.
No. But I'm going to do like a TikTok, a they on first.
Oh, you're going back to that. Yeah, that'll be fine. That'll be fine. That's edgy, but not. Well, we'll see. We'll see what happens.
They're on first. I know who's on first. No, who's on second. Well, you said they're on first. You can't have two guys on one base. There isn't. They're on first.
J.L. Cauvin, everybody.
Yeah. Okay, that's the hook. That's the Pete Dominic Apollo hook, the Sandman.
Thank you very much for joining me. That's hilarious.
Thank you. Please listen to both my podcasts. They were amazing this week.
The Sandman. All right, there he goes at JL Cauvin. See him live and check out his upcoming shows at JL Cauvin. Subscribe to his podcasts, and you can hire him on Cameo. He and I should do a date somewhere. We're talking about doing that at some point soon when I decide to leave the shed. Here now is Dr. Michio Kaku on CBS Late Show with Stephen Colbert.
Do you think there's already life in our solar system?
Well, I would love it if there's life forms on Mars, maybe even microbial life. But the best bet are the moons of Jupiter and Saturn. Europa and Enceladus have liquid water oceans. Oceans billions of miles from the sun. Who would have thought? And the oceans, the volume of these oceans is larger than the oceans of the planet Earth. So I think that even in our own solar system, there's a chance for aquatic life to develop in the moons of Jupiter and Saturn underneath the ice cover. That's a game changer.
Ooh, I want some aquatic life from Jupiter and Saturn's moon. Sounds absolutely delicious. All right. That's all I've got for you today. I will talk to you again tomorrow, unless I see you tonight at our happy hour Zoom hangout at 8 East. Sign up right now at patreon.com/Pete Dominic. If you haven't already, let's do this. I hope to see this guy at tonight's Zoom hangout happy hour. It is the great John Carroll. Take it away, buddy.
Begin, they had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, to make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment. If you stand up, all right, we got to speak up, we got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and it'll